Mission Impossible kept millions of viewers on the edge of their seats with life-or-death missions on screen. Yet the real tragedies did not lie in the characters they played, but in the actual lives of the actors themselves. Cruel illnesses, unbearable loneliness, and heartbreaking deaths turned these legends into memories. What is the truth behind these actors? Join us as we uncover their real names and honor the legacies they left behind. Let's dive in. Stephen Hill as Dan Briggs. Stephen Hill played Dan Briggs, the IMF team leader in the very first season of Mission Impossible in 1966, when he was 44 years old. With his piercing eyes and calm demeanor, he portrayed a mysterious, authoritative leader who set the tone for one of the most famous spy series in American television history. But behind that appearance, few knew that Hill was carrying a silent struggle, where his religious faith became the very burden that destroyed the career he had just built. Stephen Hill, born Solomon Krakowski on February 24, 1922 in Seattle, Washington, entered Hollywood with one unshakable principle. As an Orthodox Jew, he refused to work on the Sabbath. When Mission Impossible began, this rule quickly became explosive. The crew had to wait whenever filming fell on a Friday evening, and late-night shoots had to be cut or rescheduled. Colleagues grew frustrated, producers became angry, and Hill was soon seen as a burden. From being a trusted star, he turned into someone labeled difficult, eccentric, even rebellious. In the complete Mission Impossible dossier, his co-star Martin Landau bitterly admitted, "I felt he was digging his own grave." And then the tragedy struck. After just one season, Stephen Hill lost his role without any warning. He only learned he had been replaced when he read about it in Variety. The shock was like a sentence. The very faith that kept him alive had also robbed him of the peak of his career. On August 23, 2016, Stephen Hill died in Manhattan, New York, at the age of 94. He left behind a net worth of about $2 million, a modest sum for someone who had left his mark on two legendary TV series. To audiences, he would forever be the dignified Dan Briggs, but to the industry, Hill became a symbol of the harsh price of conviction, a man who held on to his faith, even at the cost of his career, his family, and the loneliness of his final years. Greg Morris as Barney Collier. At the age of 33, Greg Morris played electronics expert Barney Collier in Mission Impossible in 1966. Barney was a calm technology genius and a groundbreaking presence, one of the few black actors at the time to hold a leading role in a blockbuster television series of the 1960s. The spotlight turned him and his character into an icon, but it also quietly opened cracks the audience never saw. Francis Gregory Allen Morris, born September 27, 1933 in Cleveland, Ohio, seemed to enter into a solid marriage with Lee Morris in 1956. Yet behind the glow of the screen, distance began to grow. The relentless filming schedules kept him away from home, exhaustion made him colder, and arguments at home only piled up. Nearly 40 years together gradually became 40 years of endurance. By 1995, just 1 year before his death, the marriage ended in bitterness. Greg walked away from his family with a sense of loss nothing could repair, carrying a wound deeper than any illness, the feeling of having lost both his home and his bond with his children. On August 27, 1996, Greg Morris was found dead in his Las Vegas apartment at the age of 62, after years battling lung cancer and a brain tumor. His net worth was only about $500,000, consisting of a house and a few cars, a humble figure for a man who had once been a star. The final haunting image was of him walking out of a theater in disappointment after watching the 1996 Mission Impossible movie, a sad symbol of a talent who had made history, only to depart this world in loneliness. Peter Graves as Jim Phelps. Peter Graves took on the role of Jim Phelps, the leader of the IMF in Mission Impossible starting in 1967, when he was 41 years old. His maturity and commanding presence made the character an irreplaceable icon, forever tied to the image of intelligence, discipline, and courage. Yet behind that calm exterior was a life weighed down by painful secrets. Peter Dusler Ornish, born March 18, 1926 in Minneapolis, Minnesota, was at his core a family man. He married Joan Endress in 1950 and stayed with her for nearly 6 decades. But what appeared to be a perfect marriage endured bitter storms. While Graves chased the spotlight of Hollywood, Joan was left to raise their children largely on her own. Rumors of distance, of indiscretions during his tours, sent the family into turmoil. His daughters even spoke openly of their anger toward a father who had been absent through much of their childhood. For Graves, dazzling success on screen came at the steep cost of cracks within his home, a brokenness that lingered in silence until the end of his life. On March 14, 2010, just 4 days before his 84th birthday, Peter Graves suddenly died of a heart attack outside his home in Pacific Palisades, California. He left behind an estate estimated at $10 million, but more importantly, the immortal memory of Jim Phelps. In real life, the empty chair in his family's living room, where he once sat telling stories to his grandchildren, became a sorrowful symbol of his absence. Leonard Nimoy as Paris. At 38, Leonard Nimoy played Paris in Mission Impossible in 1969, stepping in as the master of disguise to replace Roland Hand. For 2 seasons, he embodied a mysterious, intelligent, and unpredictable figure who captivated audiences. Yet at the very moment Paris was being celebrated on screen, Nimoy's personal life was slipping into darkness. Leonard Nimoy, born March 26, 1931, in Boston, Massachusetts, paid a bitter price in his marriage. Fame created an ever-widening distance between him and his first wife, the woman who had stood beside him through years of struggle. Long filming schedules, cold dinners without conversation, endless arguments, all turned their home into a prison of resentment. The divorce not only took away his household, but also left deep emotional scars on his 2 young children. Nimoy drowned himself in alcohol to fill the void, but the more he drank, the more detached he became, like the very Spock character he was celebrated for. It was the tragedy of a man admired by the world, but unable to hold on to those dearest to him. On February 27, 2015, Leonard Nimoy died of respiratory failure at age 83, leaving behind a net worth of about $45 million. The final image that haunts fans is of a man who once urged humanity to live long and prosper, yet closed his own life with broken breaths, carrying with him regrets that were never healed within his family. Martin Landau as Roland Hand. At 38, Martin Landau joined Mission Impossible in 1966 as Roland Hand, the master of disguise and an indispensable member of the IMF team. His cold, ever-changing persona made audiences believe that Landau was born to play a silver screen spy, and the role catapulted him into international stardom. Yet few knew that behind his commanding presence lay a private tragedy stretching across decades. Born on June 20, 1928 in Brooklyn, New York, Landau grew up in a poor immigrant Jewish family. His difficult youth forged resilience, but it could not save the marriage that once seemed perfect. In 1957, he married actress Barbara Bain, his partner both on and off the set. Together, they had 2 daughters and were celebrated as one of Hollywood's golden couples. But behind the glamour came suffocation. Landau was consumed by perfectionism and the drive to surpass his limits, while Bain gradually felt overshadowed by her husband's growing stature. By 1993, after more than 3 decades together, the couple divorced, a collapse that robbed Landau of the only refuge he had from loneliness. Martin Landau died on July 15, 2017, in Los Angeles at the age of 89. He left behind a fortune of about $10 million, but what stayed in the audience's memory was not the number, but the deep, piercing gaze of Rollin Hand. He once confessed, "I disguised myself to become anyone, but in the end, I no longer knew who I was." A heartbreaking farewell from a talent who spent his life in roles, yet struggled to find true happiness for himself. Pernell Roberts as Boomer. At 50, Pernell Roberts made a guest appearance as Boomer in Mission: Impossible, leaving his mark with a resonant, deep voice and a commanding presence. By then, he was already famous across America for Bonanza, and audiences remembered him as the rugged, unyielding Western man. But behind the spotlight, his life turned toward a private tragedy that no glory could ever mend. Pernell Roberts, born May 18, 1928 in Waycross, Georgia, had one son, Jonathan Christopher. For him, Jonathan was not only his blood, but also his pride, his emotional anchor after years of loneliness in show business. But in 1989, a fateful phone call shattered his world. Jonathan had been killed in a motorcycle accident. The once strong father who had boldly walked away from Bonanza at its peak on principle now collapsed, powerless before fate's cruelty. After the funeral, Roberts sank into isolating grief, often refusing interviews because he could not bear to hear his son's name mentioned. He withdrew into his quiet home, living like a shadow, leaving the public to speculate. For Roberts, artistic fame had never made him weep, but this loss took everything: his laughter, his faith, and even the proud light once shining in his eyes. On January 24, 2010, Pernell Roberts died in Malibu, California from pancreatic cancer at the age of 81. He left behind a net worth of about $10 million. Yet what people remember is not his wealth, but the haunting image of a father sitting silently by his son's portrait, a moment of grief so deep it turned even a television legend into the most fragile man alive. Joseph Ruskin as Colonel Scutari. At 42, Joseph Ruskin appeared in Mission: Impossible in 1966 as Colonel Scutari, a cold, calculating villain who made audiences shiver. Though only a guest role, he left a lasting impression on the classic series, helping shape the tense, conspiratorial atmosphere that defined the show's brand. But behind that chilling face was a man carrying wounds the public never truly saw. Joseph Richard Schlafman, born April 14, 1924 in Haverhill, Massachusetts, endured a stormy marital path long before Hollywood's lights found him. His first marriage to Patricia Heard ended in bitter divorce, leaving scars that never fully healed. His only daughter, Alicia Ruskin, gradually grew distant from a father consumed by film sets and illusions of fame. Even after remarrying Barbara Greene, Ruskin's life never found complete peace. These personal fractures hardened him into the stern, cold figure he became, both on screen and in reality. On December 28, 2013, Joseph Ruskin passed away in Santa Monica, California, at the age of 89. He left behind an estate valued at around $1 million, and the image of a lonely man in his final home, a symbol of a career that burned brightly but was shadowed by private darkness. His quiet death closed the chapter on a journey both glorious and tragic, leaving audiences to remember him as a familiar face in Mission, Impossible, and Star Trek, but also as a man haunted by life's wounds until his very last breath. John Vernon as General Ramon Sabatini. In 1969, at the age of 37, John Vernon joined Mission: Impossible as General Ramon Sabatini, a cunning, ruthless, and powerful antagonist. With his imposing frame and distinctive steely voice, Vernon etched himself into memory as a terrifying dictator. Yet in real life, he was not confined to villainy on screen. His personal life, too, was consumed by conflict and bitter collapse. John Vernon, born Adolphus Raymondus Vernon. Agapsovich, on February 24, 1932, in Saskatchewan, Canada, trained at the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts in London, standing alongside Peter O'Toole and Albert Finney, with a bright future seemingly assured. But his fiery temper, stubbornness, and constant clashes with directors repeatedly derailed his career. Off-screen, Vernon endured 2 failed marriages, leaving unhealed scars. The pain deepened as his children, including actress Kate Vernon, at times grew distant, even cutting ties due to family conflict. A man who once commanded respect and fear on Hollywood sets became a lonely figure in his own home. On February 1, 2005, John Vernon died at 72 in Los Angeles from complications after heart surgery. He left behind an estate of about $2 million, largely tied to the house where he spent his final years. Perhaps his greatest legacy was not only his unforgettable villain roles, but also the image of a gifted actor undone by family turmoil and by his own temperament, tragedies that gnawed at him until the very end. Sid Haig as Masha. At 27, Sid Haig entered Mission: Impossible in 1966 as Masha, a brief villain role remembered for his towering frame, bald head, and menacing stare. On screen, he seemed born to radiate fear, a presence that heightened the show's tension. But when the lights went out, Sid Haig's life opened into a chapter of darkness few could imagine. Sidney Eddie Mosesian was born July 14, 1939 in Fresno, California, to an Armenian family. From childhood, he carried the feeling of being different, with his large, awkward build, and that sense of isolation led him toward self-destructive habits. Before fame arrived, Haig turned to alcohol and drugs as an escape from loneliness. In the early years of his career, Hollywood branded him as the violent thug, the villain, a label he could never shake. His private life was equally chaotic: turbulent marriages, scandalous affairs, and repeated mental breakdowns. These shadows followed him relentlessly, so even when he touched moments of glory, Haig lived in regret, trapped in the cinematic persona that defined him. On September 21, 2019, Sid Haig died in Thousand Oaks, California, after a fall and respiratory complications at the age of 80. He left behind an estate of about $3 million, but what the public remembers most is his chilling performance as Captain Spaulding in horror films. In his final moments, lying motionless in a hospital bed, it was said that his eyes remained wide open, a bitter symbol of a man imprisoned his whole life by the role of fear, only to be accompanied by that very fear to his last breath. Robert Ellenstein as Deputy Premier Voss. In 1969, at the age of 46, Robert Ellenstein played Deputy Premier Voss in Mission: Impossible, a character both powerful and enigmatic. Throughout that season, Ellenstein brought a presence that was firm yet cautious, giving the role a weight that resonated with audiences. Before joining Mission: Impossible, he had already built a long career on stage and screen, from guest roles in Perry Mason, The Untouchables, and Combat, to appearing in Hitchcock's classic North by Northwest. Yet the spotlight obscured a life marked by solitude and struggle. Robert Ellenstein was born June 18, 1923, in Newark, New Jersey, the son of Meyer C. Ellenstein, a dentist and 2-term mayor of the city. Despite this privileged background, his childhood was anything but peaceful. He grew up under heavy family pressures, living in the shadow of his father's political power, while carrying scars from his service in the U.S. Army Air Forces, where he was wounded and awarded the Purple Heart. Those years of prolonged loneliness and the sense of being abandoned beneath adult expectations shaped him into a quiet, sensitive, yet resilient man, a tragic side of him that audiences never saw beyond the stage lights. Robert Ellenstein died in Los Angeles on October 28, 2010, at the age of 87. He passed away in modest circumstances, with an estate of about $1 million. He left behind the image of a steadfast artist, devoted to theater and film throughout his life, yet forever marked by an enduring solitude that lingered until the end. Jack Donner as Bucko. At 38, Jack Donner appeared in Mission: Impossible in 1966 as a guest star, leaving an impression with his sharp features and intense performance. At a time when the show was exploding on American television, Donner quickly became a familiar face to audiences, appearing in a string of hit series from The Man from UN Cell to Star Trek. Yet behind the spotlight was a life filled with cracks, private tragedies few ever imagined. Jack Donner, born October 29, 1928 in Los Angeles, California, was drawn to the arts early, pursuing a passion for theater and television. But his life path was stained with bitterness. Multiple failed marriages, rumors of infidelity that tainted his public image, and a family life that unraveled despite his longing to preserve it. Even his children grew distant, leaving behind an emptiness nothing could fill. In his later years, prostate cancer loomed like a suspended death sentence, eating away at him day by day, forcing him to face an overwhelming solitude. On September 21, 2019, Jack Donner took his final breath at the age of 90, closing a career that spanned more than 6 decades. He left behind an estimated net worth of $1 million, a modest sum compared to his lifelong dedication. For many, the last image of Donner remains that of an artist collapsing once the stage lights faded. A man who gave his life to his craft, but carried into the grave the unhealed wounds of his private life. Fritz Weaver as Emil Skarbek. Fritz William Weaver stepped into the Mission: Impossible spotlight at the age of 40, portraying Emil Skarbek in 1966. He was celebrated as a rare talent, remembered for the way he transformed into each character, leaving audiences unable to forget the strength and the quiet sorrow carried in his eyes. Yet behind that remarkable career lay a deeply tragic personal journey. Fritz Weaver was born January 19, 1926 in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, into a family of Italian and American heritage. He once seemed to have a stable marriage with actress Sylvia Short, which began in 1953. But as the glow of the stage grew brighter, his private life sank into turmoil. A fiery temper, combined with the relentless pressure of the profession, fractured their relationship. After 26 years together, they divorced bitterly in 1979. From then on, distance from his 2 children, Lydia and Anthony, grew, leaving Weaver burdened with an enduring loneliness, even as he continued to shine under stage lights. Fritz Weaver died on November 26, 2016 in New York, at the age of 90, after battling prostate cancer. At his passing, he left behind a net worth of only $1 million, far too little for the legacy of a man who had given so much to his art. The image that lingers is of an actor both proud on stage and painfully alone in life, a haunting duality that makes audiences mournful whenever they remember him. Barbara Bain as Cinnamon Carter. When Barbara Bain was 35 years old, she joined Mission Impossible in 1966 as Cinnamon Carter, the IMF's most glamorous, cool, and intelligent agent. At a time when American television rarely allowed women to break free from the roles of dutiful wives or decorative dolls, Barbara redefined the image of the female hero. The role not only won her 3 consecutive Emmy Awards, an unprecedented achievement, but also made her the symbol of the entire series, a face that could not be replaced. Yet behind that dazzling screen image, the life of Barbara Bain, born September 13, 1931 in Chicago, Illinois, was filled with private pain that was hard to share. Her marriage of more than 3 decades to actor Martin Landau seemed perfect, but behind the glamorous red carpet photos was a slow, simmering fracture. 2 talented artists with strong egos collided constantly. Endless arguments, unanswered suspicions, and a growing distance as the stage lights forced them to live in characters more than in themselves. Their divorce in 1993 not only ended a legendary romance, but also left Bain with wounds that never healed. She once admitted that while her career gave her glory, it also stole away her trust and the warmth of family. Today, at 93 years old, Barbara Bain is still alive, the last surviving witness of Mission Impossible's original era. She spends much of her time teaching at the Actors Studio, participating in charity work, and making quiet appearances in small theater productions in Los Angeles. Her current net worth is estimated at around $10 million, a modest figure compared to the stardom she once held, but proof of a lifetime of resilience and dedication to art. Peter Lupus as Willie Armitage. In 1966, when Peter Lupus was 34 years old, he stepped into television legend as Willie Armitage in Mission Impossible. He was the team's silent muscle machine, few lines, but always present at the most intense moments of the show. Yet behind that wall of muscle was a harsh childhood few ever imagined. Peter Nash Lupus Jr., born June 17, 1932 in Indianapolis, Indiana, grew up in a working-class family weighed down by financial pressures and heavy expectations. Though he stood out early for his 6'4" height and extraordinary physique, young Peter still had to push himself constantly to escape the shadow of poverty. Those years of deprivation left him with loneliness and an obsession with always being stronger than others, always rising above at any cost. That drive led him to bodybuilding, where he became champion of Mr. Indianapolis, Mr. Indiana, and finally Mr. International Health Physique, a journey forged not only in sweat, but also in the pain of trying to escape the fate of a constrained childhood. Today, at 93 years old, Peter Lupus is still alive, though he rarely appears in public. He once shocked audiences by posing nude for Playgirl in 1974, and later set a world strength record at the age of 75. Now he lives quietly, with an estimated net worth of about $3 million. His image, the muscle-bound hero of Mission Impossible, remains an immortal symbol of strength and timeless endurance. Lee Meriwether as Tracy. In 1968, when Lee Ann Meriwether was just 33 years old, she appeared in Mannix, leaving a strong impression with her refined beauty and sharp poise. Since her triumph at the Miss America pageant in 1955, she had secured a place in Hollywood with many roles, including her portrayal of Catwoman in Batman, 1966, which remains iconic. But behind the glamour, Meriwether's life was not made only of roses. Lee Ann Meriwether was born May 27, 1935, in Los Angeles, California. She was hailed as the perfect symbol of American womanhood after being crowned Miss America, yet fate dealt her bitter cracks in her private life. In 1958, she married actor Frank Alletter, and together they had 2 daughters. But the marriage that once seemed secure soon turned into an emotional prison. Alletter was often absent for work, and his coldness gradually pushed the couple apart. Meriwether frequently bore the weight of the family alone, while her acting career demanded constant sacrifices. After more than 15 years of enduring loneliness and pain, she decided to divorce in 1974. For a woman once adored by an entire nation, being abandoned in her own home was a wound that never fully healed, casting a lasting shadow over many years that followed. Today, at 90 years old, Lee Ann Meriwether still retains her graceful presence. She occasionally appears at fan events, where the affection of audiences reminds her that she has never been forgotten. Her net worth is currently estimated at around $5 million, a modest figure compared to her artistic legacy and the memories she has etched into the hearts of audiences over decades. Though many stars of Mission Impossible have departed in tragedy, they continue to live on forever in the hearts of fans through every frame of film. Who do you remember the most, and whose loss still haunts you the deepest? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel to discover more emotional stories behind the screen.